what that is doing to children is it's stealing their youth. Ultimately, it's aging them biologically. From the age of about 12 or 13 until 16 or 17, I was the poster boy for terrible circadian health. And as a result, experienced anxiety, depression, suicidality, obesity, issues with ADHD-like symptoms, problems with focus and attention, and engagement in school and life and relationships and family.
I get so many questions. Do blue blockers even work? Are they good? How long does it take? What do I need to get? What benefits will I see? Hello and welcome. I'm Sarah, and today's guest is Daniel White. And in this episode, we talk about the negative effects of blue light on health, mental health, metabolism, sleep, but with a big focus on children and teenagers, because Dan has just finished a very exciting study on blue blocking glasses and bedtime routines. And he's had some really exciting results with the children that he's been working on. And we're going to talk about that study because this is very important for parents who want to protect themselves and their children from obesity, metabolic problems, sleep problems, ADHD, mental health, and such like. Dan's also running a big circadian challenge in October where it's free to participate, and the information is in the description, but we also talk about it in the podcast. Dan's a registered nutritionalist and qualified functional medicine coach, and he has many years' experience in educating groups as well as research. And this was a really fun conversation, and I hope you get some valuable information out of it. If you're interested in learning more about quantum biology, but most importantly, how to apply it to your daily life, I've got a brand new course just about to come out called Quantum Basics, and the link's in the description so that you can sign up. Hi, Dan. Welcome to the channel. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell everybody what we're going to be talking about today? Because it's a really important subject of mental health in especially young people.
Absolutely, Sarah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I feel like a bit of an esteemed guest right now. So just to give you a bit of an introduction to myself for your listeners, my name is Daniel White. I'm the founder of an organization and a charity called the Sleep Better, Live Better Foundation. Although that's changing slightly, and I'll explain more about that as we go through today's episode. But just give people a kind of 411 on history, on my history at least. I've just turned 30. From the age of about 12 or 13 until 16 or 17, I was the poster boy for terrible circadian health. And as a result, experienced anxiety, depression, suicidality, obesity, issues with ADHD-like symptoms, problems with focus and attention, engagement in school and life and relationships and family. So that was, the catalyst that began an almost 17-year journey for me now through initially, an understanding or an explanation of conventional psychology. So did a psychology undergraduate, and then I went into studying a master's in nutrition, functional medicine, as many of us, go down this route of beginning to unpick our health, a more holistic approach. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, stumbling across the work of Jack Kruse, as you and many of your listeners will, and really going down a rabbit hole until I got to the inspirational moment, which maybe we'll dive into in a second, around the research that we've been conducting with our charity in schools.
Yes. Do you want to walk people through what you've been doing with your study? Because I think it's really important, because I get so many questions. Do blue blockers even work? Are they good? How long does it take? What do I need to get? What benefits will I see? Will it help my son or daughter who's got terrible mental health problems and can't sleep?
Yeah, so maybe this will act as a useful Q&A for all of those people asking those questions. Sure. So just to give a little bit of a history and understanding, as I said, I experienced terrible mental health, and don't get me wrong, my nutrition was a part of it, my addiction to computer gaming was a part of it, but maybe the most fundamental aspect of that was late nights in front of screens, technology devices, and this is a time at which 17 years ago, I mean, the first iPhone hadn't even come out then. Okay, so I was like one of the only children in my generation who was so deeply addicted to technology use and exposure to artificial blue light, like really, really late into the night. And I often say to people, you only have to walk into a school now to recognize that that's almost every child. When I go into schools and we deliver education, I can guarantee you that there's about 20% of the hall that's asleep. no matter what time of day it is, they are asleep, catching up on their sleep in the daytime. You've got about 60% of the school that are sort of like eyes open, semi-engaged, sort of on their phones, scrolling, doing all the social media, the apps, the games, all those things that keep children and adolescents in particular awake so late into the night. And then you have about 20% that generally look like human beings, functioning as nature intended. And back in the day when I had these challenges, I was certainly, the minority. And after 15 years of exploring, nutrition, psychology, functional medicine, mind body medicine, really looking at an internal, external, mind, body, spirit approach to everything, I stumbled back across, what was the first thing that tripped me up, which was my circadian rhythms, which was my light exposure, which was my relationship to technology, and understanding the contraindications of that. And I was working at the time with a lot of adults and, finding it quite difficult to get adults to change behavior. Working with, a lot of businesses delivering educational programs and such like that. And we're very lucky in Guernsey and the Channel Islands, where I'm from. We have connections to a lot of large businesses globally. And it was only one night when I was falling asleep. I was at the time taking part in a business mentorship program, and they said to me, what's your origin story? How do you connect with your audience? How do they resonate with you? And I realized, thanks to the dream that I had that night, which was, I was still up on television, on Good Morning TV, GMTV, and I know it's a dream because GMTV doesn't exist anymore, as far as I'm aware. And I was saying, to the presenters, we did this thing in schools. We used blue light blocking glasses. We provided some simple sleep and circadian health education, and we transformed a generation of children. And it was that was the come to Jesus moment, if you like, that inspired the charity and the research.
Yeah, so when it comes to the problems with light, we've talked a bit about mental health, but childhood obesity and diabetes is on the way up as well. So when it comes to your research and studies, you mentioned the children looking like zombies at school. What have you noticed about body weight and that metabolic aspect of young people?
Yeah, so it's really interesting now. The research that we did, which I'll discuss more about in a second, was looking specifically at key factors surrounding sleep. So energy levels, stress and anxiety before bedtime, sleep quality, sleep consistency, things like that. But what I ascertained after going into all of the schools in Guernsey and the Channel Islands, I'm really lucky here. First of all, I have such a close connection to a lot of the educators because we're a very small island community. It's only about 45 square miles. We've got about 70,000 people on the island. And story after story alluded to the fact that autoimmune disease, obesity, as well as, mental health and all of these problems are through the roof. So it's undoubtable that even in the UK, where we're said to have, much less problems with metabolic issues than other places like the US, there is a rising tide or a trend towards these challenges in children as young as like 3 and 4. The group that we used, we worked with teenagers aged kind of like 13 all the way through to about age 19, but we've already had calls as a charity to consider what we can try to do to infiltrate even earlier in the primary years to help people, because as you know, and as your listeners know, with blue light toxicity and disrupted circadian rhythms, comes these cravings for all of these hyperpalatable foods and these simple behaviors, whether it's scrolling through Instagram, social media, using more technology than we should, the kind of the pull, the dopamine pull, as I say, towards these less than desirable behaviors that impact so many other areas in life is just so much higher.
Yeah, and also there's the problem with leptin resistance because that's a circadian hormone, and if you mess up your leptin signaling before the age of 6, it can be really difficult. It's like to reverse later. I mean, it is possible, but that's again priming a child for problems with weight and obesity, and that's again something that I think is really important, the hormonal aspect. So when you talk to people in schools, how receptive are the teachers, and do you get any problems with doctors or nurses or anybody saying this is stupid?
That's a really great question. So it pulls me back to thinking about, when I started to put these studies into place. So essentially, this dream happened, and then it was from there, all guns blazing to write a research kind of proposal, contact the relevant authorities, have discussions with, teachers and those within the education system. And some of them, honestly, they opened their doors, they laid down the carpet, and they said, "We are so desperate for something to change. that if you're saying as a charity you want to come in and deliver this education and do this research, we're not going to get in your way. And then there are other people who are, perhaps higher up the bureaucratic ladder who were telling me I was stupid, that I was sending out the wrong sort of messages and signaling, suggesting that blue light blocking glasses, especially the nighttime amber or red pairs, could help kids, that I'd actually be encouraging worse behaviors from them, and that I should actually, be coming in and delivering sleep education, not providing like any products or tools and such like that. And my argument, to anybody listening right now is that in an ideal world, we wouldn't need blue light blocking glasses, but we don't live in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. We live in environments where the lighting is outside of our control. The amount of time we spend on devices is outside of our control. So we need to do what we can to manage those contraindications. And if you said, to 15-year-old Daniel, who was depressed, anxious, and at times suicidal, and said to him, Dan, you can still play some of your video games every evening, or you can still spend some time on social media, but do it with a pair of blue light blocking glasses on, or do it with a light filter on the screen so that, the blue light is not spiking neurological pathways that are keeping me awake later and later into the night, then I might have had a very different trajectory throughout my later teenage years, when I really had to work very diligently for the last 10 or 15 years, really, to undo a lot of those challenges, like you mentioned, around leptin and insulin and all of those things. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does, because I think when we talk about physics and light, there's so much information about circadian rhythms. There's like 40 or 50 or 60 years of research. So anybody can go and look up artificial light at night and all of these unpleasant situations that it causes. So the data is very strong, because doctors and I suppose certain bureaucratic people always challenge you to say, prove it. So the evidence for the blue light is extremely strong. Just before we go into your study, because you mentioned that we shouldn't need blue blockers if we had proper lighting, how well would a school receive changing all of its light bulbs back to incandescents?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I mean, that's quite the question. Um, so in our approach, in my approach, and my understanding and working within communities for the last decade has been that you have early adopters, right? So you have like that 10% of people who are ahead of the curve. So, there were some schools, there were some teachers, there were some kids who took this up straight away, but then everybody else lags behind. And in the case of large policy issues, which are, lighting in schools, access to Wi-Fi, access to technology, the screens that people use and such like that. As much as I wish that schools would just adopt lighting changes like that would, it would have far more benefits than just improving sleep health, obviously, as we were able to. The challenge here is that there's just so much money and so much policy and so much interest involved from other parties within an industry. I think we need to like stamp the data on it to get people to take it more seriously. And that comes back to the point of the study really in general, was that that there is, in my opinion, a wealth of information out there, peer-reviewed studies about blue light blocking glasses, especially those with an amber tint that block almost 100% of blue light at night, and how they can improve sleep outcomes and issues like that. But there was nobody doing field research with large numbers of teenagers. And I think that, what we achieved through our study is almost like, an executive summary that I can hold up to a principal of a school and they'll take me seriously as a result of seeing it. So our next step with especially some of the local schools that we worked with in our initial study is to begin to experiment and explore, how could we look at lighting changes? I get a feeling that because of the policy around like electrical use, especially in the US. I'm sure you'll have seen the changes that are supposed to be coming up, where a lot of the circadian lighting that's being developed, the LEDs, because they're inefficient, supposedly, energy wise, they won't be allowed to be used. So I get a feeling that we would have a large, problem with incandescence. But I hope that in the coming years, as people develop, more full spectrum technology, stuff that especially includes infrared frequencies in bulbs, that we might be able to look at that as like the long-term answer. But in the short term, the glasses and the education has been very helpful.
Yes, because there'll be a lot of people listening in the US, and I do know a reasonable amount about schools there and the amount of break time that children get, and some places you can't open a window, because again, that's another way to let the natural light in. But there are bulbs made by people like Scott Zimmerman of Naira Lighting that are more circadian friendly, even though they don't have the UV. So I think it's something that again, the blue blocking study that you did is something that the children or the teenagers did in their own time, or I can't remember. I did read the paper. Did they wear them in the day when they were on screens, or just after dark? I read over very quickly. So I think as it's your study, you can probably showcase it better than I can. But I was really impressed with the outcome of the data.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking, and I'll share about that in a moment. And yeah, you're right. I mean, like the ideal goal is a return to nature, right? And I've already had so many conversations with teachers within these schools who are now saying, well, we're going to look at policy in terms of like how we teach certain classes. We can take young children outside and ask them to count twigs if we want to teach them maths, or we can go outside and do a lot of stuff, in relation to geography. And now we have all these tablets, and if we can use these tablets outside, it's a better solution, and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, I think in the long term, I think a return to it is important, but obviously we're looking at policy and we're looking at changing big institutional ideas around things, which takes time. So kind of brings me on to the study. So what I did was we recruited the 7 schools on Ireland. So this is a mixture of different socio-demographic groups. So some public schools, some private schools, some boys only girls, some mixed schools, some girls only schools. And I went in and we recruited about 500 students initially. And what I wanted to do to begin with was just demonstrate how powerful blue light blocking glasses were. I subsequently realized over my own years of experience that was only half of the coin, and the other half of the coin is time spent outdoors during the daytime. And then there are ancillary things such as nervous system regulation, consumption of caffeine in children, helping people to approach it from a theory to like putting it into practice. So in terms of like daily routines, morning, evening, all of those sorts of things. So we landed on a design that's called open level waitlist. So instead of having a placebo pair of glasses, which I think you can understand is a little bit difficult when it comes to blue light blocking glasses, the mentor that I had at the time, he suggested that we buy some, like grey lens glasses and have one group that used the active and one that used the placebo. But I thought that placebo was not only a little bit naff, but we didn't really have the funding to go out and buy, 10,000 pairs worth of placebo glasses. So what we decided to do is actually this open level kind of split design where we had one group A, which just wore amber lens blue light blocking glasses. The lens technology which came from Viva Rays. So very big shout out to Rudy and the gang that sponsored us there. So the first group would wear the glasses for 3 hours before bedtime. That was the instruction. The second group would wear the glasses and they'd also receive 2 short 45-minute education sessions from me. So within those educational sessions, I give them an introduction to understanding of their circadian rhythms, kind of how that influenced by human evolution. And then we dived into topics such as light exposure, caffeine, morning, evening routines, taught them some simple like relaxation breathing exercises and all those sorts of things. So there was information within that about going outdoors and spending time, as much time outdoors as possible to gain full spectrum light. But obviously putting that on the individual is very different to putting it on a family. So that, for example, parents are encouraging the child to do it versus putting it on the institution so that the institution is making changes to the way that they educate and set agendas around, how children spend their time within a school day. So the second group, as I mentioned, get those classes and the glasses. I've never said it like that before. That was quite catchy. The third group got the classes only without the glasses, and then the fourth group went on a wait list. So instead of having the pure control, we just had a group that didn't make any changes essentially. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, yes.
Cool. So we ideally wanted to look at it over a 28-day period. So we took these what we call sleep disturbance questionnaires at day 0, again at day 14, and then again at day 28. Because my then academic mentor said to me, if you can prove something in 14 days, that's great. But if you can sustain it for a further 14 days, that's absolutely fantastic. So went into all of the schools, learned so much about conducting field research and dealing and handling data and questionnaires and big cohorts of people, which was a challenge within itself. But essentially what we got was really good data from day 0 to 14. So you're always going to have attrition in studies like this, kids who don't go to school that week or don't fill out the questionnaire or sign up and then don't want to participate, whatever. So we had about a third attrition, which I think is probably sort of industry standard, which got us down to around about 300 and something children that did the follow-up questionnaire at day 14. And then from day 14 to day 28, we had an additional challenge that we couldn't have foreseen, which is that 2 of the schools had an outbreak of COVID. So we didn't get as much data as we would have liked to from the combined group and the education only group, but we did see a robust improvement, as I'll explain in a second, in the glasses only group. So high level overview, just to summarize, we've got 4 groups, one with glasses and education, one with education, one with nothing. The improvements that we saw, would you like me to talk about that next?
Yes, please.
So what we saw was generally at onset, some of the schools had slightly lower scores, and those corresponded to their socioeconomic status. So some of the public schools, obviously, there's a great mixture of children out there attending all different sorts of educational opportunities. Those in public schools had slightly worse sleep scores to begin with. Those in the private schools had slightly better sleep scores. One could obviously, postulate that maybe home environments are a little bit more supportive. There's less stress in the home environments. Higher socioeconomic status generally suggests that parents have more time with children. Sometimes, sometimes not. From day 0 to 14 in these questionnaires, the questions led into kind of 4 main indices. So it's sleep quality, sleep consistency, stress and anxiety before bedtime, and then next day alertness levels. And what we saw in the combined group, so in group B, we saw a statistically significant improvement across all 4 of those variables from day 0 to 14. So the best results that we got, the best improvements that we saw were in the combined group, as you might expect. The next best group was the glasses only group, which actually made nearly the same level of improvement across sleep quality, sleep consistency, and next day alertness, but we didn't see such an improvement in stress and anxiety levels before bedtime. Again, we'd have to replicate this with a larger sample to prove anything, but ultimately my theory there is that we taught some of the kids in the education groups how to wind down, how to breathe, how to regulate their nervous system, how not to consume caffeine after school, all these crazy energy drinks that kids are slurping down these days, and I think that might have had an impact on their stress and anxiety levels prior to bedtime. But across the board in all the other areas, improvements were pretty much the same. We then saw improvements across the board for the education only group, but they just weren't statistically significant. So we saw about twice the improvement in the groups that used the amber blue light blocking glasses as we did in the education alone. And just to kind of reiterate, with the education alone, we did provide education relating to light. So we told children that blue light, disrupts their sleep. We told them you should dim your lighting in the evening. We told them about screen filters that are available for their laptops and their mobile phones. So the chances are there was some level of lighting alteration going on in that group, but they didn't receive any glasses. And so I think, you and I both know, many of your viewers will know, anybody who's probably used blue light blocking glasses, I think I've only probably had a handful of people in like some 5,000 or 6,000 pairs that I've given out that have come back to me and said, these things don't do anything, because the mechanism of action is there, So I think demonstrating that when children use the glasses, the improvements are so grand. And then in the wait list group, actually 3 of the kind of sleep factors or indices decreased over that time period. So we can't tell as to whether that was exam stress, particular things that were going on for that group. But it really demonstrated, the robust improvement that we saw in both groups using the glasses. And then obviously, the greater improvement that we saw in the combined group.
Well, that's brilliant. So with the paper, I know I saw the white paper. When will it be published? And are you planning to extend the study by making it bigger and longer, or are you going to collect more parameters to actually assay whether there is an improvement in alertness? Because there's all sorts of neurological tests people can do, like Stroop tests and a whole suite of. They use it in sport a lot to assess coordination. There's a whole. I won't go into it, but how are you going to extend this? Because obviously this is really exciting, and it's paved the way for more. So what's the next plan?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So a lot coming, which we'll expand on throughout the rest of the interview. But essentially, what I would like to do now is I would like to expand this to thousands of children, because I think in this case, more tightly controlling the data isn't the way for us to go. If we want to influence public policy, it's to get larger as the number of people on board and to demonstrate the same effect. In terms of data collection, I think this is where things can be improved a lot. One of the things that we're talking about now as a charity and as an organization is, how do we reach these children with education, with prompts, with reminders for data collection and these sorts of things. And I think the truth of the matter, as sad as it is that, we have to meet children where they're at, which is usually at the end of a smartphone. So, how we go forward now, how we look at collecting data, we look at providing education. And again, that may not be within school to school, that might be larger, broader kind of subsects of society as we move forward. But in terms of next rounds of a study, I think what we would probably look to do is replicate something similar, with a little bit better data gathered. So we might look at, for example, using wearables that could help us to provide, some more objective measurements of, not that these things are all that accurate all the time, but of like length of time spent asleep, activity levels, and marry that up, with some of the questions that we already used, just so that we can really kind of finally put to bed any of the naysayers and the people who say, oh, well, your questionnaire wasn't robust enough, or, you should have asked these questions and that questions. But it's something that we're open to exploring with people as we move forward, because ultimately, when the study was run, it was just me who funded it, who wrote it, who applied for it, who delivered it. And then I began to get people, involved to analyze the data. And I subsequently now, as a result of the work that I was called to do, have a team of people around me who are supporting this. So the opportunities are a lot greater moving forward than the one-man army that kind of threw this thing together.
Yeah, so you've started a giant blue light snowball. So, but that's why, because when it comes to a field study, because I'm a biochemist, I'll always think in a different way because it's subjective and people don't, it's important. I know that these out of 1 to 10, how are you feeling, are valuable. But then obviously biochemical information like cortisol levels, that would sort of really nail it. And again, I can imagine trying to draw blood from teenagers would be a disaster, but then collecting spit is sort of something that would also silence the naysayers, because again, I can imagine you want to keep doing this forever, and you'll think, and with a study, it just leads into new studies. And again, if you make a bigger study, it will open up doors to a study with different measurable variables at the end. But I think it's really exciting that you've got a whole team now doing it. And do you plan to extend it to any other countries other than the UK?
Yeah, so that all really good questions. So, first of all, thank you for sharing some of those thoughts. I did know about the cortisol spit test and things like that, and I think they're definitely things that we should look into. Obviously, the direction that we move in terms of the research, if we want to gather more rigorous data, especially like biochemical data, the number of participants usually has to come down by a lot. Otherwise, funding has to increase exponentially. And we all know problems with funding around these sorts of areas, unless, I have a company that wants to come and give me £100,000 to prove that their blue light blocking glasses work or something like that. Then, the chances are that that money is not necessarily going to be found. And it could impact, could in fact be used perhaps in better ways, more tangible ways, to change lives. So kind of where we're looking forward to now is, so as a result of the research, it really encouraged us to want to scale globally. So we're moving the charity that I registered, which is Sleep Better, Live Better in Guernsey in the Channel Islands, and we're re-registering as a team. We have a new brand, which is called Quantumly. So Quantumly will be our education organization, and then our sister kind of brand will be the Quantumly Foundation, which will provide funding, resources, education, zero cost to consumer, for those schools, organizations, subsectors of society that essentially can't afford this education and information. We may package up our education efforts and commercially sell them to private schools and things like that, and then put that money back into our charity so that we can fund more research, more education to the places that can't access it. But yes, we plan to scale outside of the UK, and the way that we're doing that initially is through launching an awareness, education, and fundraising campaign that we've called the Circadian Rhythm Disruption, or the acronym is CRD, the CRD Challenge. So we've got ambassadors, yourself as well included, all over the world, who are ready to help us, push the button on getting the information regarding the paper, and also our next steps out there into the world. And then just answer your final question, when is it going to be published? That's a really great question. I wanted it to be published 6 months ago, but when you're working with people on a voluntary basis, sometimes, your data analyst or your researcher makes himself unfortunately unavailable for a while. So we've had a couple of things that have kind of stalled us in terms of publishing the paper itself, but we're hoping to put it out publicly at the same time at which we launch the Circadian Rhythm Disruption Challenge.
Okay, that's great. Which journal did you have in mind for publishing it in?
So we haven't gotten that far yet. At the moment, we've got it in white paper form. We will need to rewrite parts of it for a more academic audience if we're going to put it in a journal. But I guess, you know, for me personally, having had to deal with everything on a voluntary basis for the last 3 years, it became so overwhelming that I got somebody to come in and help us to write the paper. So I've kind of put it to one side for now and doing the kind of visionary thing of where we go forward to then get some feedback, from people such as yourself and others who are more academic in this space that might give us, that motivation and that push to then go and publish it in a peer-reviewed journal. But it hasn't been our priority right now, but that's not to say that it wouldn't happen.
Because there are so many papers on blue light and blue light blocking glasses already in the literature. And so off the top of my head, I'd know something like PLOS One would probably publish that. And then there is those kinds of journals which cover a broad spectrum of topics, yet have a reasonably good impact factor and has a reasonably good sort of audience to read it, because you still want people to read the publication and take it seriously, but also it's just something you can add to your portfolio, and also it's more impetus later. So just coming back to blue light, say for parents who are listening, because I don't think 13-year-olds and 18-year-olds listen to this channel, what exactly is blue light doing to them? So we've talked about leptin and insulin. What about actually the structure of the eye, myopia, retinol damage? What else do these glasses do other than help people's mental health that will set children up for a better life later?
Yeah, and before we go into like the biochemistry of it and the biology and the biophysics, I suppose, like just to touch on like a very pertinent emotive point is that what blue light as an exposure to artificial light at night, that being of the blue spectrum from conventional LEDs, mobile phones, computers, tablets, laptops, home lighting, bathrooms, bedrooms, schools, libraries, hospitals, the gamut, right? What that is doing to children is it's stealing their youth. Ultimately, it's aging them biologically. When I think back to my childhood, I didn't really have a childhood or teenage years. My time was spent in front of a computer playing video games and being addicted to the emerging world of social media. In my adulthood now, at the age of 30, I'm experiencing some things for the first time. Like, 5 years ago, I did my first set of 6 pull-ups. This last year, I surfed my first wave. There's many things that I believe are so important for children to experience in their young life, and they can't do it that if they're sleep deprived, if they're depressed, anxious. This mental health conversation we have, it's a very broad spectrum, right? And what I say to people is that, when you improve your circadian health and when you sleep better, when you feel more energized, it doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum, you're going to move closer towards like vital and optimal and like truly, being able to contribute. Because I think that, the future of our world is very uncertain. We have a lot of problems and challenges, and we're doing, a lot of great things to try and solve those. But ultimately, the people who put our plans into action or who envisage and visualize ways out of these problems will be future generations, but it won't be future generations of children who have had their soul sucked from their body, because they weren't able to, rest and recover. And it's far more than that, like you said, who knows truly what blue light is doing to the dopamine pathways and how that's affecting children's relationships with themselves and their spirituality from a very, very young age. I think that, that's probably one of the most undiscussed areas, that is potentially the biggest impact for, how we change things moving forward. But as you said, everything from emerging eye problems, to weight gain, to problems sexually, infertility, children younger and younger now. It seems to have a strange impact on, adolescent young males where they have less of a sex drive, but then, young females seems to be going through puberty much earlier and maybe developing, more sexuality earlier in their youth. So I don't know what the full results of this giant study that we've been doing on society is, but I'm sure that in certain subsects of society, hopefully not those that we reach with our charity, we will find out in the next 5 or 2 years what the true extent of the damage of this situation has been.
I want to thank my sponsor, Lightwater Scientific, who helped me deliver free valuable information to you and also allow me to have great guests on this channel. Lightwater Scientific produce the purest and most deuterium-depleted water in the world. Depleting or lowering your deuterium has numerous health benefits, from better metabolic health, more energy, greater resilience, less brain fog, increased physical performance, enhanced healing, and healthier mitochondria. Deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen, also known as heavy water, because it's bigger and heavier than regular hydrogen. Even though deuterium makes up only 0.02% of hydrogen, it's found everywhere. Deuterium is a burden to your body because it interferes with the intricate chemical reactions that occur by slowing them down. Deuterium is kryptonite to your mitochondria, and we need healthy mitochondria to produce energy. There's over 60 years of scientific research on the negative effects of too much deuterium on health, and also the positive benefits of lowering deuterium in the body. Light water, deuterium-depleted water, is 100% safe and non-toxic. In fact, it's the closest in structure to the metabolic water that your mitochondria produce. Light water, deuterium-depleted water, comes in 5 or 10 parts per million glass or plastic bottles. So level up your health by leveling down your deuterium today. The purchase link is in the show notes, and use code Dr. Sara for a discount off your order. Yeah, when you mentioned that about the early puberty in girls, a long time ago, I read a book by T.S. Wiley, because she's written two, and one of them's on sex lies and the menopause, and the other one was called Lights Out, and it's all about how blue light and other factors affect when the onset of puberty, and it's actually a very big cancer risk, because there are Dr. Maureen was telling me that women don't get breast cancer in places where there's no electric light. So again, going through puberty early is a problem. And this is why I was asking about, or I brought up this subject, because some children are too young to understand, and we rely on the parents doing it for them. So we can tell people, or we can educate children, but it's unlikely a 13-year-old's going to go, "Mummy and Daddy, can you buy me some blue blockers?" So it's about getting the parents on board as well, because I think the way you said about robbing children of their youth, that's one important factor. But then if it affects people's eyesight, that's irreparable later, that's another big problem. And then I know that too much blue light leads to acne, which is a big lever that I use against teenagers, because they're really difficult to work with, and I'm very impatient these days, but I'll still persist. And I've found that the blue light and the acne tends to go down well, and that instantly means iris goes on the screen, and it's taken a bit more seriously. So I think people don't really realize how much the blue light can affect not just the skin. You mentioned dopamine. We were talking about ADHD. And the other thing which really bothers me in society is the overuse of psychiatric medication in young people, because first of all, they have all kinds of problems like the SSRIs and sexual desires, and then lots of them are mitochondrial toxins, and those medications we don't really understand. And then there's all sorts of things added to these medications like aluminium and fluoride to make everything even worse. So even if you could get or prevent children having to use these medication really early, I think that would be a huge bonus. And also, when we were talking about hormones, with melatonin, it controls sex hormones as well. So this idea of children not sleeping because they've got no melatonin during the night, that again is going to have, as we say, we don't know what's going to happen. But I think from the standpoint of why I get so passionate about it, it's stopping children having to go on these medications, and they could end up on 3 or 4 and then not be able to get off them again until they're 50.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I stand with you on all of that, and I think that, and I can appreciate your experience that you've had, no doubt working with families, working with adults who have young children, and the difficulties in getting that information through to the youth. It's quite funny because I've experienced something quite different, and that's that, I would have problems getting adults on board to then spread that message within families. But when I started going into schools, right, and this is the difference, you haven't been into an educational setting. When you go into the educational setting and you come on board as a trusted educator by the school, so you're given by the institution which you trust and you believe has your best interest at heart, they're telling you, well, this gentleman's coming in to tell you about this thing that's really important to do with your sleep. The uptake that I've had And the amount of parents that I had messaging me saying, where do we get these for our family? Because our teenager won't stop talking about how much better they feel and how much, more energy they've got. Because at least in my experience as a 30-year-old adult, I've done a lot of work, like very deep work on my beliefs, my conditioning, and like understanding how I became programmed in a sense, to become who I am. But teenagers aren't so stuck in their ways. By the time you get to your third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation, you become a little bit more of a tough cookie to crack. But generally, from what I've experienced, when you have a teenager, at least if you catch them early enough, or especially younger children, which is a slightly different kettle of fish, because obviously the majority of that education then has to come through an institutional channel and has to be embedded into we're talking United Kingdom here, but years reception through to year 7, so age 4 to 11, really you're at the mercy of the school system before you have a mobile phone. Let's hope. You are really at the whim of what school wants to teach you. So in my like vision for the future, I see like a standard of circadian sleep education being taught by all schools, of all jurisdictions, so that by the time you become a teenager, you're already aware of what this technology is going to do. And obviously, that doesn't stop you getting addicted to it, right? But when you get a teenager who's 13 or 14 or 15 years old, I mean, my circumstances were a little bit different because I was very deeply addicted to this one particular game, and there was more factors associated with it, such as the social life that I had within the massive multiplayer online universe and the friends that I had, and online versus offline, and that's a separate conversation. But ultimately, if you had told me there's a way here that you can not feel so crap when you're not playing this video game because you can sleep better, or these kids who are struggling with anxiety or depression, or have neurological problems, and you can say to them, there's a way that you could, and I don't like to use this word, but it suits teenagers and their vocabularies, the way that you could fit in more, or the way that you could feel more normal around your peers, every child would take that. And that's why they take medication, right? Because they go to the psychiatrist, the doctor, and they say, I'm not the same as all my friends here. I'm, being left out because my mental health's not good enough. So resolve the problem. And what we're giving them is an option that, isn't pharmaceutical, which, for all the reasons that you mentioned and more, is obviously the better option. So I guess to summarize what I'm saying here is that I kind of realized when I used to work with businesses that if I rang up the receptionist and asked for the CEO, I'd never get through. But if I called up the CEO, or if I turned up on his doorstep and I had a compelling enough argument, then he would give the information out down the channels through the signals that would reach everybody within the organization. So I feel very similar about education, which is why we conducted research so that we can have conversations with those people who are so high up the ladder, that, hopefully the whole school, the whole district, the whole state, the whole country will eventually get the memo. And then it won't be a case of, we do a very good job within conventional society, especially within public health, of putting the onus on the parent or on the child or on the end user to manage their behavior. And that creates a lot of guilt. It creates a lot of shame. It creates feelings of worthlessness and not being able to, follow through on what so many other people can do, et cetera, without realizing that, as a country and as like educational bodies and institutions, we have a duty of care, and that we wouldn't need to put that, if we had good food systems, if we had good water systems, we wouldn't have to put the onus on the individual to look after themselves if that education was just embedded into the way in which we live and breathe.
Yeah, what you've said is actually quite profound, because I've kind of given up and I don't think this country will look after me and help me in any way, shape, or form. So I'm of the thought I have to do it all myself. And then I need to educate the public, because I've also given up on trying to fight with doctors or people who just want to argue with me. And I think, well, I'll just go for the population and see who's going to take it. Whereas what you said about getting a lot of uptake from teenagers, that really resonated with me, because you're obviously a kind of fun guy, and I can imagine them seeing you as a big brother, and this guy's come along and he speaks our language, not some sort of grumpy old woman like me, but I can be fun, and I have got lots in common with teenagers, in my sense of humor. But I think it's really important that you actually had an uptake from the teenagers, because as you said earlier, that they're the ones who are going to be demanding, oh, I feel much better, and then the parents will just get them the glasses. also, when you were talking, I was thinking, well, I'm sure headmasters and school governors and people that work on the county council have all of these problems like obesity and diabetes and bad sleep and anxiety, same as GPs who have to sit in blue light all day from sort of 7 a.m. until whenever the surgery closes. So it's not something that, oh, it's all about the children. The other people who could help you and us would actually really benefit as well. That's why I get so exasperated at the whole situation, because it's not like we're trying to help one demographic. It's basically everybody will benefit. Not, of course, blue blocking glasses as the beginning. There's a lot more. And once people get one win, like the glasses, then they'll be like, oh, what else can I do? This works. What about this? What about that? If I do this, will I feel twice as good? So this is where I'm sometimes flummoxed, that the high up people don't want to have better sleep and less problems as well.
No, I can resonate with everything you said, and I can appreciate, and I can already feel that you've been round the mill with this conversation in your head, like thinking about how you can approach this. And I think the honest like truth is that, and this is an English British saying, I believe it's just like it's horses for courses, right? You know, I can tell you now for a fact, I will willingly disclose that a lot of the inspiration that came from the CRD challenge that we're about to generate and create, and the inspiration that went into the education that I delivered in schools, came from me listening to your podcasts. It came from me listening to Sarah Klein's podcast. It came from, at a very high level, listening to Jack Cruz on podcasts. But it's horses for courses, and those aren't the right horses for the right course if we're talking about going into a school and educating. So naturally, when I had this dream around this, big thing that we did in school, is all very grandiose, yeah, great. But it's like I realized that I am like one of the only people I know, or was at that point, who could really resonate with these children and get their buy-in. And so it's about like, and as a result, since I've met many more people who experienced a lot of the same things as me, and Bob's your uncle, funnily enough, they really want to get involved in this because it's like the language that they speak to the people that they speak to. And so when it pertains to your point around the people higher up, I think and I'm going to butcher this quote, so I'm not going to try properly, but it's if you want to see an old paradigm fail, you don't try to change it, you just create a new one. So in my opinion, when we like have a mass adoption of enough schools with enough forward thinking teachers or educational bodies, and enough children who are like shouting from the rooftops about this, because perhaps in 12 months time we've gotten some celebrities involved through raw optics, or other ambassadors, or people in the space who are connected to people in visible positions that children look up to and that they listen to. Obviously I can go in and speak about my experiences, but a lot of children aren't going to resonate with my experiences because they weren't obese, fat, depressed, anxious. But if you've got, I'm just thinking in terms of who's the really famous footballer in the UK that Raw Optics works with. Oh, that's really going to annoy me. But like one of the most famous footballers, I think he's at Manchester City, right? If he went public on the television and said, my performance, my energy levels, my mood has improved 10 or 20% since I started applying this education or using these glasses, that would reach another subsector of society. And as you kind of mentioned in terms of, incremental steps, the reason we began with the glasses is because they're the low-hanging fruit. They're that thing that your energy levels, let's imagine life as a video game, right? Because I love video games. Your energy levels improve by 20. Your willpower goes up by 10%. Your focus and concentration improve by 20%. Well, what does that mean? That means you've got enough foresight to think, oh, well, actually, like what's this thing in this cup doing to me? If that light's having an effect on me, what's the thing that I'm eating doing to me? Could I make changes in other places? And I feel like the glasses just represent the simplest way to show somebody, number one, how fundamental light is, but then also just how much our epigenetic environment impacts our health.
But also, I think how important the eye is, because the eye kind of controls all of these different pathways in the body, and people think it's just a camera. So I think going for blue blocking glasses and the eyes is a very big needle mover. But I agree that the chances of getting a celebrity should be pretty high at some point because of the kind of lives they live. It's sort of blue light and non-native EMF hell. And there are a lot of sort of suicides or drug problems and other things that are rife with the celebrities. And all it needs is one person to start talking about blue blockers. And I mean, it'd be great if, what's her name, Miley Cyrus or someone like that, somebody reasonably forward thinking and sort of younger. But yes, and then of course with sport, I mean, they are adopting quantum lifestyles. I was listening to Jack Cruz talking to a wrestler about adopting quantum habits in order to improve wrestling and prevent injuries. And of course, it spans across all sports. And nowadays with athletes, just they'll do anything to get an extra 1%. And like we've said, the glasses are just the beginning. And if a celebrity or a footballer or a boxer or an MMA fighter or whatever it is that young people look up to started talking about it, it would gain a big interest. And I'm not sure why they haven't, or maybe they don't want to, or maybe there isn't a blue light blocking glasses company that can pay them enough to be able to. So you need a sort of philanthropist. But I think it's what you've said. It's like everything. You've started a snowball and somebody had to do it. And then it's about now collecting a load of people along the way as it rolls down the hill to help you. Because I'm definitely in. I'm sure the people who follow this will be interested as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for raising all those points. And I guess, I look at it, and if you had told me 4 years ago when I had this inception of this dream that it was going to take me 4 years of, working pretty much for free the majority of the time to get this study to a place where people would even begin to ask questions about it and take it seriously, would I have signed up? I don't know. But I now know that I'm glad it hasn't gone any quicker than it has. And when I look at everything, and it breaks my heart, to have conversations. I mean, I could go off on side tangents here about, other islands close to Guernsey where I live who refused to put this into place. They wanted to go for school start times changes instead, 2.5 years on, and nothing has changed on that island. And it breaks my heart because every year they release their mental health survey, and more young people are committing suicide. And there are children within every community in the world right now who need this education, like as a matter of life or death. But ultimately, there is, a time and a rhyme and a rhythm for every season. And I think that in many ways, I've tried to speak to large optometrists, Specsavers, one of the biggest optometrists in the world. It's based in Guernsey in the Channel Islands. They didn't want anything to do with this. They, had their statement based on a meta-analysis that was done of daytime blue light blocking glasses, massively unregulated in terms of the wavelengths that they blocked and all these sorts of things. Oh, they do nothing. The meta-analysis says nothing. And I got really frustrated and angry for months. And then I thought to myself, you know what? I don't think they're the people to carry the message. And I think that the people within the quantum and circadian health space, I mean, I know Bond Charge, I know Block Blue Light, I know Ra Optics, I know Viva Rays. I've had conversations, apart from Bond Charge. So if anyone from Bond Charge is listening to this, please get in touch. I've had conversations,
I'm wearing a Bond Charge top. Yes, Bond Charge are very helpful, and Rudy's helpful, and Matt Maruka's helpful. And then there's Alexander Wunsch as well. That's whose glasses I'm wearing.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, and I honestly believe that, people that operate in this space tend to be a lot more abundant, or act a lot more abundantly than, other industries. And I believe that there is a slice of the pie for every blue light blocking glass company and more. And that if, we act in ways which are aligned with our values, that there will be right now, it's like less than 1%, right? It's less than 1% of the people in the world who know about this stuff, and it's even less than 1% that adopt it. So with the right footprint, and the right allegiances and the right relationships and the right, cooperation, I believe that like all of these companies can do a lot better than many of these other optometrists are currently doing. I don't want Specsavers to come and be the next blue light blocking glasses people, because they clearly have no, understanding of the issue whatsoever. So why not build a new paradigm with companies that are maybe smaller now that become the mega giants of the future in terms of, lighting and circadian equipment?
Yeah, the thing is, if Specsavers made blue glasses, they'd be really cheap and they wouldn't work properly anyway, because it would just want to maximize the profits. But I think it's one of those things. They have their business model, and they're not interested. So I'm just now about finding people. I know it's like who you have to pick who you fight your battles with, and I don't even bother anymore. It's okay. Well, there's people that want to argue with me, fine, but there's a whole load of people I haven't met yet that really want to listen to what I've got to say. So I'll just find them. And when it comes to all of these problems that blue light cause, with people, it gets to the point where it becomes unbearable. And if somebody offers them a solution, if you get it at the right time, they're just going to snap it up. Even if 2 weeks ago they said, oh, those stupid glasses, that's a load of BS, they'll have a massive low and think, right, I've got to do something about this now, because I can't carry on like this anymore. So that it's all about having a problem, and then there's a solution that can begin to fix it. And like you said, the glasses are a low-hanging fruit. So it's great that you have such a vision for the blue light blocking glasses. But then, like you said, it is a gateway into other quantum practices. So if people want to help you or reach out to you or learn more or follow you or support you or participate in the study, where do they find you?
Yeah, so this is really great, and I know we don't have a lot of time left to record, so I'll try and summarize it very neatly. So myself and my partners, Avi, Lauren, and Jeff, who within their own right are coaches and have an interest in their own brands within the circadian and quantum education space, we've come together to create Quantumly, which will be an education organization for the 99%. The people who have no physics or biochemistry or biology backgrounds, no health backgrounds whatsoever. It's the plain speak, it's the visual, animated, infographic laden education that the modern world so desperately needs. The cutting edge contemporary 3-minute video that actually manages to keep your attention. And then alongside that, we have the Quantumly Foundation, who will be pledging, funding to education and research efforts, not just our own research. So, if you're somebody listening who would like to get involved, and I don't mean financially, but maybe you have some background in research or analytics, or setting up studies or education. Maybe you're a teacher, an educator right now. Maybe you are on the school board, and you're a parent, or you're an ambassador for a school or an education institution. I'd recommend people get in touch. But most especially, if people really want to see what we're about and what our vision is about, then I would encourage you to come and participate in the CRD, or the Circadian Rhythm Disruption Challenge. And so, as part of the relaunch of our charity, we're launching a challenge that was inspired. I don't remember if you remember the ASL Ice Bucket Challenge.
Oh, yes, I do, because I actually know Paula Maguire as well. So yes, because
Oh,
she
wow.
and also that's a motor neuron Yorkshire, something that I always support.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, well, the ASL Ice Bucket Challenge, I mean,
Yeah.
we all know now how important the ice is, but we didn't back then.
Yes.
And that raised somewhere between like 120 and 170 million pounds, right? So if we could even like get 1% of that sort of, fundraising, and that we would do something. And so we've generated, with the help of several other people in the field, Nico Kennedy, as I said, inspiration from yourselves, Jack, many other people, a 3-week mini educational step-by-step learning journey. So the idea is that I don't know when this episode is going to be aired, but we will already be live on the crdchallenge.com. And we already have a network of some 200 or so quantum circadian health ambassadors helping us to spread that mission out there. But it's a free 21-day education program that you can come and sign up for, which will essentially give you the basis of education for any teacher, child, parent, or otherwise. And we're hoping that through the generation of a community around this challenge, that then we will get more introductions and more opportunities to speak to more schools, more leaders, more institutions, so that the next steps of our charity are not us sitting there racking our brains, oh, who should we speak to? But instead, we now have a community of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who are directing us towards the places, like you said, who are ready to hear the message. Because there's no point in knocking on the door of somebody who doesn't want to know. But as you find more of those early adopters, and that snowball, that momentum generates more and more and more. So that's our thing, next. So the crdchallenge.com, I'm going to be launching in October. I can't tell you exactly what date, but whether you know something about circadian rhythms or not, please come and consider being a member of the free community and contributing your voice, your vision, and your energy momentum to the future.
Yes, I'll make sure it goes up before in September, or even before the end of August, so that people have a chance to listen to this. And if they want to participate in your free challenge, then they get the opportunity to. So all the best. I'm sure we'll talk again when you've got even more to say and you've grown a giant sort of the snowball has kind of rolled down the mountain, and your operations worldwide and massive. So thank you very much for sharing all of this with me and the audience.
No, sorry, it's been a pleasure. It's a coming full circle moment to be able to come onto your podcast and discuss many of the things that you educated and inspired me about in the last couple of years, and what we're doing with that information.
But I suppose I'm just growing as well. I have my own plans. And I think something you said so important. If you blow up too quickly, you can just blow up your nervous system and everything. So being impatient, sometimes thinking, oh, I wish this would just get bigger, actually, when it grows slowly, can be a massive, massive bonus. because, you know, things can blow up and then go pop, and that's the end of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to turn around right now and have 100,000 schools, emailing my inbox tomorrow saying that they want circadian sleep education. But my answer would be that number one, I can't reply to you all, but number
Yeah,
two, I don't yet have the infrastructure to deliver it.
exactly.
So it's a slow and steady, wins the race.
Exactly. And, you know, you don't want to peak too early. So, yes.
Definitely
Anyway,
not.
so thank you very much, Dan. That was really, really fun talking to you.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. And if you haven't got blue blockers already, or blue blockers for your children, I hope it's motivated you to look into buying a pair. If you're interested in learning more about quantum biology, I've got a brand new course, Quantum Basics, that's about to come out, and the information's in the description. So this course is suitable for everybody, but it has a strong focus on actually applying the quantum principles. Up and coming videos on the channel will be a video about quantum skincare, and also an interview with Jim Stevenson Jr., everything you ever wanted to know about vitamin D, especially supplementation and the problems that you can run in with that.